The crystalline walls of the Galactic Council chamber stretched higher than any building on Earth. Dae-Young stood at the entrance, watching as representatives from 47 different species took their seats. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special pods. After 15 years of membership, he still found the sight breathtaking. "They're staring at us again," Hannah whispered beside him. Her hand rested near her sidearm, a habit from her military days that she couldn't quite shake. "Let them stare," Dae-Young replied calmly. He straightened his dark suit and walked forward, his small delegation following behind. Tae-min, the youngest of their group, carried the data files. The young diplomat's hands trembled slightly, but he kept his face composed. The human section was located in the outer ring of the chamber, far from the center where the elder species sat. It was a not-so-subtle reminder of Earth's position in the cosmic hierarchy. Dae-Young didn't mind. He had learned patience during his years as a soldier, and later as a peacemaker on Earth. Prime Arbitrator Velthuon called the session to order. The Krillion's body resembled a massive insect, with crystalline wings that caught the light and scattered it across the chamber. When Velthuon spoke, the translation devices converted the clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. "We gather for the Centennial Summit," Velthuon announced. 3 of our member species stand at the edge of war. The Krillian Collective, the Brucali Empire, and the Vexthari Union have failed to resolve their territorial dispute. We have debated for 6 weeks. No solution has emerged. Dae-Young listened as the 3 species presented their cases. The Krillians claimed ancient rights to the disputed sector, showing star maps that were thousands of years old. The Brucali countered with military might, displaying holograms of their war fleets. The Vexthari spoke of economic necessity and trade routes that had existed for centuries. Each presentation lasted hours. Each one said the same thing in different ways: "This territory is ours, and we will fight for it." War-Chieftain Gorth of the Brucali slammed his massive fist on the speaker's platform. The reptilian warrior stood 3 meters tall, covered in scales that looked harder than steel. "We have conquered 17 systems in the last century," he growled. "This sector will be the 18th, with or without council approval." Several species gasped. Others muttered among themselves. The threat was clear and direct. Scholar Prince Nalvix of the Etherians floated forward, his energy form pulsing with displeasure. "Such barbarism," the prince said, his voice like wind chimes. "This is why younger species should not have full voting rights. They lack the wisdom for true civilization." "Younger species?" Gorth laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "The Etherians hide behind philosophy because they forgot how to fight. At least the Brucali are honest about what we want." The debate continued, growing more heated with each passing hour. Dae-Young watched and listened, taking mental notes. Hannah kept her eyes on the security arrangements, always alert for threats. Tae-Min frantically recorded everything, trying to keep up with the rapid exchanges. As the day wore on, the arguments became circular. The Krillians refused to compromise on historical rights. The Brucali wouldn't back down from their military position. The Vexthari insisted their economic needs trumped all other concerns. The other species tried to mediate, but each attempt failed. Finally, as the artificial sun in the chamber began to dim, marking the end of the session, Dae-Young stood up. "The human delegation requests permission to speak," he said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Then someone laughed. It started with one of the smaller species in the back, then spread like a wave. Soon, more than half the chamber was laughing or making their species equivalent sounds of amusement. Velthuon's wings fluttered in what Dae-Young had learned was the Krillian version of a smile. "The humans wish to contribute? This should be entertaining." "By all means," Gorth rumbled, still chuckling. "Let the children speak. Perhaps they will tell us a bedtime story to help us sleep." Dae-Young felt Tae-Min stiffen beside him, but he remained calm. He had expected this reaction. Humanity had only been traveling faster than light for 200 years. Most of the species in this chamber had been exploring the stars for millennia before humans even discovered fire. "We request permission to mediate this dispute," Dae-young said. Keeping his voice steady and professional, the laughter grew louder. Even some of the species that were usually friendly to Earth seemed amused by the suggestion. Mediate? Velthuan clicked rapidly, a sign of genuine mirth. Honored Ambassador, with all respect to your species, you have been part of this council for merely 15 years. The Krillian Collective has maintained order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. What could humanity possibly offer that we have not already considered? Nalvik's energy form pulsed brighter. The humans barely control their own solar system. They have never conquered another species. They have never built an empire across the stars. They arrived in faster-than-light ships that other species invented. What expertise in galactic affairs could they possibly possess? A delegate from the Thorian species, a race of Livingstone, added his voice. No offense intended, Ambassador Dae-young, but Earth has experienced what? One, perhaps two major planetary conflicts? Some of us have witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Your species is still in its infancy. Dae-young waited for the chamber to quiet down. He could feel Hannah's anger radiating beside him, though she kept her face neutral. Taemin looked down at his feet, clearly embarrassed. When the laughter finally subsided, Dae-young spoke again. We understand your doubts. We do not claim ancient wisdom or vast experience. We simply ask for 24 hours to present humanity's approach to this problem. If our proposal has merit, consider it. If not, you have lost nothing but a single day. Velthuan consulted with several other elder species. The private communication lasted several minutes. Finally, the arbitrator turned back to face the chamber. Very well, Velthuan said, and Dae-young could hear the amusement still in the clicking voice. The council agrees to hear the human proposal tomorrow. We are curious to see what the newest members of our community have learned in their brief time among the stars. Gorth leaned back in his seat, his massive arms crossed. This will be worth watching. Perhaps the humans will surprise us. Or perhaps they will simply confirm what we already know, that some species are meant to lead and others are meant to follow. The session ended. As the delegates filed out, Dae-young heard the whispers and saw the amused glances directed at the human delegation. Several species were already placing bets on how badly the humans would embarrass themselves. Hannah waited until they were in the corridor before speaking. Sir, they're treating us like a joke. I know, Dae-young replied. They're not even trying to hide their contempt, Taemin added. His voice tight with frustration, Dae-young stopped and turned to face his team. Let them laugh. Let them underestimate us. We have 24 hours to show them something they've forgotten. Something that their thousands of years of civilization have buried under pride and tradition. What's that? Hannah asked. Dae-young smiled slightly, the first emotion he had shown since entering the chamber. That sometimes the newest voice in the room can hear things that everyone else has stopped listening for. They walked back to their quarters in silence, while behind them, the Galactic Council prepared to be entertained by the foolish humans, who thought they could solve a crisis that had stumped the wisest minds in the galaxy. The human quarters were simple compared to the elaborate spaces assigned to elder species. 3 small rooms connected by a common area, with basic furniture and standard communication equipment. Dae-young didn't mind. He had lived in far worse conditions during the wars on Earth. As soon as the door sealed behind them, Taemin threw his datapad onto the table. They laughed at us. They actually laughed. How are we supposed to help species that think we're nothing more than children playing at diplomacy? Hannah moved to the window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. The kid has a point. We're outmatched in every way. Experience, technology, political power. What do we have that they don't? Dae-young sat down slowly, feeling the weight of the day in his bones. He was only 46 years old, but sometimes he felt ancient. The scars from Earth's last major war were invisible to others, but he carried them every moment of his life. His wife and daughter had died in that conflict, victims of a missile strike that had been meant for a military target. That was when he had stopped being a soldier and started learning how to prevent wars instead of fight them. We have something they've forgotten, Dae-young said quietly. We remember what it's like to be afraid, truly afraid. Not afraid of losing territory or trade routes, but afraid of extinction, of destroying ourselves completely. Before anyone could respond, a chime sounded at the door. Hana's hand moved to her weapon, but Dae-young waved her off. Enter! 2 more humans walked in. Dr. Bioram was a small woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. She specialized in xenocultural psychology, studying how different species thought and felt. Behind her came Wu Jin, a young engineer who handled their technical systems. I came as soon as I heard, Bioram said, setting down her equipment. We have 24 hours to accomplish what the entire council couldn't do in 6 weeks. I assume you have a plan? Dae-young stood and moved to the center of the room. We're not going to solve this the way they expect. No competing star maps, no military assessments, no economic projections. They've already tried all of that. Then what? Wu Jin asked, looking confused. We're going to do what humans do best, Dae-young replied. We're going to listen. Over the next hour, Dae-young explained his plan. It was simple, perhaps too simple, but it was all they had. While the elder species had focused on the leaders and their official positions, the humans would talk to everyone else. The workers, the support staff, the ordinary citizens who would actually fight and die if war came. Hana was skeptical. The Brukali maintenance crew isn't going to tell us anything useful. They're loyal to their war chieftain. Maybe, Dae-young agreed. But loyalty and agreement are not the same thing. People follow orders even when they have doubts. We need to find those doubts. Ram nodded slowly. It could work. Most species have some form of social hierarchy, but they all have the same basic needs. Safety, food, family, purpose. If this war threatens those needs, the common people will know it, even if they won't say it openly. They divided the work. Hana and Taemin would conduct interviews with lower-level staff from all 3 hostile species. Bioram would analyze cultural patterns and communication styles, looking for hidden meanings in what people said and didn't say. Wu Jin would dig through public records, social networks, and trade data to find patterns that the official reports had missed. Dae-young would prepare the presentation itself. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Dae-young found himself alone in his small room. He pulled up a holographic display and began reviewing Earth's history. Not the official diplomatic version that humans showed to other species, but the real history. The bloody, brutal, shameful history that humanity had spent the last century trying to move past. The world wars, the nuclear standoffs, the ethnic cleansings, the environmental destruction. Humanity had come within moments of destroying itself dozens of times. Other species had their own dark chapters, certainly, but they were so far in the past that they had become mere stories. Humanity's darkness was recent and raw, but humans had survived. They had learned, they had changed. Not perfectly and not completely, but enough to step back from the edge of extinction. That experience, painful as it was, might be exactly what the Galactic Council needed to hear. Hours passed. Through the walls, Dae-young could hear Hana and Taemin conducting their interviews over communication channels. Bioram's equipment hummed constantly as she processed data. Wu Jin's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling information from 1,000 different sources. Around midnight station time, Taemin returned to the common area. He looked exhausted but excited. You were right, he said, dropping into a chair. The junior Vexthari trade officer I spoke with practically begged me to find a peaceful solution. She said her colony world has been sending petitions to their government for months, asking them to negotiate instead of fight. She could lose her job for telling me, but she did it anyway. Hana came in next, looking thoughtful. I talked to a Brukali supply coordinator. He didn't say much at first, you know how they are about showing weakness. But eventually he admitted that his nestmate is in the military. He doesn't want her deployed to a war zone over what he called political theater. Those were his exact words. Even Bioram found something interesting. The Krillian hive mind is not as unified as they pretend. I detected inconsistencies in their public communications. Some hive clusters are supporting the war effort strongly, but others are questioning it. The Krillians present a united front, but there are cracks beneath the surface. Wu Jin had the most surprising discovery. I mapped the trade routes in the disputed sector. You know what I found? All three species already share that space. There are mixed trade stations, joint mining operations, even a few mixed species colonies. The citizens of these species are already cooperating and living together. It's only the governments that can't get along. Dae Jung absorbed all of this information, fitting the pieces together like a puzzle. The picture that emerged was clear. This war wasn't inevitable. It wasn't even particularly popular among the regular citizens. It was driven by political leaders trying to prove their strength, backed by ancient grudges that nobody alive actually remembered experiencing. This is good work, Dae Jung told his team. But it's not enough. We need to make the council see what we're seeing. We need to make them understand that the solution isn't in star maps or fleet counts. It's in remembering why they formed a council in the first place. The Oram smiled tiredly. And how do we do that? Dae Jung was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we tell them a story. Not about the Krillians or the Brukali or the Vexthari. We tell them about us. About Earth. About what we learned when we almost destroyed ourselves. The team worked through the night. Dae Jung wrote and rewrote his speech, trying to find the right words. Not too emotional, but not cold and clinical either. He needed to reach these ancient species not as a representative of humanity, but as one sentient being speaking to others about shared pain and shared hope. As the artificial dawn began to brighten their windows, signaling the start of a new station day, Dae Jung finally finished. He read through the speech one last time, then closed the file. Will it work? Taemin asked quietly. The young diplomat had stayed up all night, too nervous to sleep. I don't know, Dae Jung admitted. But it's the truth. Sometimes that's all you can offer. Hannah checked her weapon one more time, a nervous habit. The other delegations have been busy too. I intercepted some communications. They're taking bets on how badly we'll fail. Some species are actually looking forward to it like we're entertainment. Let them bet, Dae Jung said. He felt calm now, the way he used to feel before important missions during his military days. We're not here to impress them. We're here to remind them of something important. Whether they listen or not is their choice. Rum packed up her equipment. For what it's worth, I believe in what we're doing. These species have forgotten what it's like to be vulnerable. They've lived so long that they've built walls around their empathy. Maybe we can help them remember. Wu Jin stretched, his joints popping from sitting too long. I just hope they don't laugh us out of the chamber before you get to the good parts. Dae Jung smiled slightly. Oh, they'll laugh at first. But that's okay. Sometimes laughter is how people protect themselves from uncomfortable truths. Our job is to keep talking until they stop laughing and start listening. They prepared to return to the council chamber. Dae Jung wore the same simple suit as the day before. He carried no data pads, no holograms, no weapons. Just himself and the words he had prepared. As they walked through the corridors of the station, they passed other delegations heading to the chamber. Some species nodded politely. Others ignored the humans completely. A few made sounds that the translation devices rendered as chuckling. Dae Jung kept walking, steady and calm. In a few hours, he would stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and tell them a story about failure, loss, and the hard-won wisdom that came from nearly destroying everything. He would tell them about humanity's shame, in the hope that it might prevent 3 ancient species from making the same mistakes. The council chamber was completely full. Word had spread through the station that the humans were going to present their mediation proposal, and nobody wanted to miss what promised to be an amusing spectacle. Species that rarely attended normal sessions had sent representatives. Some had even brought what appeared to be recording devices to capture the moment. Dae Jung walked to the center platform alone. He had asked his team to remain in their seats. What he needed to say would work better if it came from just one voice. One person speaking directly to the assembly, Prime Arbitrator Velthuan S. Wings shimmered in the light as the Krillian called for order. The council recognizes Ambassador Dae Jung of Earth. The human delegation has 20 minutes to present their proposal for mediating the Territorial dispute? 20 minutes. Dae-Jung had been given hours yesterday to listen to military assessments and economic projections. The message was clear. The council was granting this time as a courtesy, nothing more. They expected him to fail, and they wanted to move on quickly. War Chieftain Gorth lounged in his seat, his massive form taking up space meant for 3 normal-sized beings. 20 minutes seems generous, the Brucali rumbled. I predict the humans will need only 5 before they run out of things to say. Several species made sounds of agreement. Dae-Jung saw Scholar Prince Nalvik's energy form pulse with what might have been amusement. Even representatives from species that had been friendly to Earth looked skeptical. Dae-Jung stood quietly for a moment, letting the chamber settle. Then he began to speak. I'm not going to show you star maps, he said, his voice clear and steady. I'm not going to present military assessments or economic projections. I'm not going to argue about who has the oldest claim to the disputed territory, or who has the strongest fleet, or who needs the resources more desperately. He paused, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. Instead, I'm going to tell you a story. A story about my homeworld and about what my species learned when we almost destroyed ourselves. Some of the delegates shifted in their seats. This was not what they had expected. A few looked intrigued. Most still appeared amused. Earth is young, Dae-Jung continued. We've only been part of this council for 15 years. Most of you have civilizations that existed for thousands of years before my species even discovered fire. I acknowledge this. I respect it. But youth has one advantage that age sometimes forgets. Our mistakes are recent. We remember them with perfect clarity because the scars are still fresh. He walked slowly around the platform as he spoke, his movements deliberate and calm. In the 20th century of our calendar, humanity fought 2 wars that spanned our entire planet. We called them world wars. Millions died. Entire cities were destroyed. We developed weapons powerful enough to end all life on our world, and we pointed those weapons at ourselves. The chamber had grown quieter. Even the amused expressions were fading, replaced by something more attentive. We fought over territory, just like you're fighting now. We fought over resources and old grudges and political ideologies. We convinced ourselves that our side was right and the other side was evil. We taught our children to hate people they had never met. We built walls and drew lines and declared that certain pieces of land were worth dying for. Dae-Jung stopped walking and stood still in the center of the platform. And then, after millions had died, after we had brought ourselves to the edge of extinction, something changed. Not quickly, not easily, but gradually, painfully, we learned to stop. How? The question came from an unexpected source. One of the Thorian delegates, the Livingstone species that rarely spoke in open session, had leaned forward. How does a species at war with itself simply stop? We didn't simply stop, Dae-Jung replied. It took decades. It took generations. But it started with one crucial realization. We learned to listen. Not to our leaders, not to our military commanders, not to our politicians. We learned to listen to each other. To the ordinary people who would actually have to fight and die in these wars. He pulled up a small hologram, the only visual aid he had brought. It showed Earth from space, a blue and green sphere hanging in darkness. This is my world. It's not the oldest planet or the most advanced or the most beautiful, but it's ours. And we nearly destroyed it because we forgot one simple truth. The hologram zoomed in, showing cities and forests and oceans. Every being in this chamber, regardless of what species you belong to, shares certain basic needs: safety, family, a future for your children, food and shelter, and the chance to live without fear. These needs don't change whether you've been traveling the stars for 10,000 years or 200. War Chieftain Gorth growled. Are you suggesting that the mighty Brucali Empire has something in common with lesser species? I'm suggesting that all species have more in common than they have differences, Dae-Jung replied calmly. Your soldiers have families just like mine do. Your citizens want to live peaceful lives just like mine do. Your children deserve a future that isn't defined by war, just like mine do. He turned to face the three hostile delegations directly. Over the past 24 hours, my team spoke with members of your species. Not your leaders, but your ordinary citizens. Trade officers, supply coordinators, maintenance workers, people who will actually experience the consequences of this war. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several delegates looked outraged that humans had been conducting interviews without official permission. Valthuan's wings fluttered rapidly. Ambassador De Young, is this true? You conducted unauthorized interviews? We spoke with people who were willing to speak with us, De Young replied. We didn't hack any systems or violate any security protocols. We simply asked questions and listened to the answers. And what did you learn? This came from Scholar Prince Nalvix, who had drifted closer to the platform. What could common workers possibly tell you that we don't already know? De Young met the energy being's gaze directly. We learned that they don't want this war. Any of them. The Vexthari trade officer who told us about her colony world's petitions for peace. The Brucali supply coordinator who fears for his nestmate's life. The Krillian workers whose hive mind is not as unified as their leaders claim. Dead silence filled the chamber. We also learned something else, De Young continued. We mapped the disputed territory, not just the borders and resources, but the actual activity happening there. Do you know what we found? You're already sharing that space? Mixed trade stations? Joint mining operations. Even some mixed colonies where your species live and work together peacefully. He turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. This war isn't happening because your species can't coexist. You're already coexisting. This war is happening because your leaders are locked in a political standoff, driven by pride and ancient history, while your ordinary citizens have moved on and built a shared future. Gorth stood up, his massive frame towering over everyone. You dare to claim that I don't know my own people? I claim that leaders sometimes become so focused on their conflicts that they stop hearing their people's actual needs, De Young replied. His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. I know this because I was a soldier once. I fought in Earth's last major war. I believed in my cause. I thought I was protecting my people. His voice grew quieter, but somehow more powerful. Then a missile struck my home. It was meant for a military target, but it missed. My wife died. My daughter died. She was 7 years old. After that, I stopped being a soldier and started learning how to prevent wars instead of fight them. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even Gorth had sat back down. I learned that the hardest thing a warrior can do is stop fighting, De Young said. It's easy to go to war. It's easy to convince yourself that violence is the only answer. What's hard is choosing to be vulnerable. Choosing to admit that maybe, just maybe, there's another way. He looked at each of the three hostile delegations in turn. I'm not here to lecture you. I don't have the wisdom of 10,000 years. But I have the wisdom of pain. I know what it's like to lose everything because people in power couldn't find a way to stop fighting. And I'm asking you, not as an ambassador, but as someone who has stood where you're standing now, don't make the same mistakes we did. What do you propose? The question came from the Vexthari delegation. Their high commander had been silent until now, but the tall, angular being leaned forward with what might have been genuine interest. I propose something simple, De Young replied. Before you commit to war, before you send your fleets and your soldiers, take one more step. Talk to your people. Not just your advisors and generals, but the ordinary citizens. The ones who will actually fight and die and lose their loved ones. Ask them what they want. Really ask and really listen to their answers, that's it. Gorth sounded almost disappointed. That's your grand solution? Talk to people? Yes, De Young said simply. That's it. Because in my experience, that's where every lasting peace begins. Not in star maps or military strategies, but in human connection. In recognizing that the being across from you, no matter how different they look or how old their civilization is, wants fundamentally the same things you do. Nobody laughed when De Young finished speaking. The silence in the chamber felt heavy, like the air before a storm. He returned to his seat next to Hannah and Tamin, his heart pounding but his face calm. He had said everything he needed to say. Now it was up to the council to decide. Prime Arbitrator Velthuan S-Wings fluttered slowly, a sign of careful consideration. The human proposal is ... unprecedented. The council must deliberate. Before the arbitrator could continue, something unexpected happened. A young Vextari delegate stood up, her crystalline form glowing brighter than usual. Honored council, I request permission to speak. Velthuan's clicking intensified. Junior Trade Officer Yuna, this is highly irregular. You do not have the authority to address the council directly. I know, the Vextari replied, her translated voice shaking slightly. But the human ambassador spoke of listening to ordinary citizens. I am an ordinary citizen. My colony world, Vextari 7, has sent 17 petitions to our government asking for peaceful negotiation. All 17 were rejected without response. If the council wants to know what Vextari citizens think about this war, I can tell you. We don't want it. The High Commander of the Vextari delegation rose, his form rigid with anger. Trade Officer Yuna, you are relieved of duty. Return to your quarters immediately. But Yuna didn't move. With respect, Commander, dismissing me doesn't change the truth. My colony isn't the only one sending petitions. There are dozens of worlds across Vextari space where citizens are questioning this conflict. We don't understand why we're fighting over territory that we already share with the Krillians and Brucali. Enough! The commander's voice carried the weight of authority. 2 security officers moved toward Yuna. Wait! War Chieftain Gorth stood slowly, his massive frame drawing every eye in the chamber. The Brucali leader looked at Yuna for a long moment, then turned to Velthuan. Let her speak. The humans asked us to listen to our people. Perhaps we should start now. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Gorth, the most warlike of the 3 hostile leaders, was defending a junior officer who had spoken out of turn. Velthuan's wings spread wide, a gesture of uncertainty. War Chieftain, are you certain? I am, Gorth replied. He looked at Yuna again. Speak, Trade Officer. Tell us what your world thinks of this war. Yuna straightened, her glow intensifying. My world is a border colony. We trade with both Krillian and Brucali merchants regularly. Our children attend mixed-species schools. We've built lives that cross the boundaries you're fighting over. If this war happens, it won't just be soldiers who suffer. It will be all of us who have learned to live together. She looked around the chamber, her voice growing stronger. The disputed sector isn't empty territory. It's full of people. Mixed stations where different species work side by side. Trade routes that benefit everyone. Cultural exchanges that have enriched all 3 of our civilizations. Starting a war over this sector would destroy everything we've built together. These are the words of one young idealist, the Vextari High Commander said coldly. She does not speak for our entire species. Perhaps not, De Jong said, standing once more. But she shouldn't have to. That's why I'm asking for 3 days. Let's find out what your people actually think. Let's create a space where ordinary citizens from all 3 species can speak honestly about what they want. Over the next hour, the council debated. Some elder species argued that this was a dangerous precedent, undermining the authority of established leaders. Others pointed out that the traditional approach had failed for 6 weeks. Perhaps it was time to try something different. Finally, Velthuan called for a vote. The measure passed narrowly. The humans would have 3 days to facilitate citizen dialogues. If no progress was made, the council would move forward with traditional diplomatic channels, and the 3 species would likely go to war. The work began immediately. De Jong's team, with help from sympathetic council members, set up holographic town halls. Citizens from Krillian, Brucali, and Vextari worlds could participate remotely, speaking their minds without fear of immediate reprisal from their governments. The first day was chaotic. Hundreds of people wanted to speak. Mothers from all 3 species talked about not wanting to send their children to fight. Merchants discussed the economic benefits of cooperation. Teachers described successful mixed-species education programs. Soldiers expressed weariness with endless conflict preparation. Hannah and Taman managed the logistics, scheduling speakers and maintaining order. Bilram analyzed the patterns in what people were saying, identifying common themes and concerns. Wu Jin ensured the technical systems kept running despite the massive volume of participants. Dae-young listened to it all, taking notes and occasionally asking questions. But mostly, he just listened. On the second day, something shifted. The three hostile leaders who had been watching the proceedings with varying degrees of skepticism began to engage. The Vexthari High Commander asked a question about trade impact. A Krillian Hive speaker admitted surprise at the diversity of opinions within their own collective. Even Gorth seemed affected when a Brucali soldier spoke about wanting to see his nestmates grow up without war, but the real breakthrough came late on the second day. A Brucali warrior named Gara requested to speak. She was a warlord, a high-ranking military officer known for her combat prowess. Everyone expected her to support the war effort. Instead, she said something that changed everything. "My nestmate died in the last territorial conflict," Gara said, her translated voice rough with emotion. "We were fighting over a sector that neither side actually needed. We fought because our ancestors had fought there. We fought because surrender felt like weakness. My mate died for no reason except pride." She paused, and the holographic chamber fell completely silent. "I am a warrior. I have killed many enemies. I do not fear battle. But I'm tired of fighting wars that serve no purpose except to prove we are strong. We are strong. Everyone knows this. We don't need to prove it by dying over territory we already share." Gara looked directly at War Chieftain Gorth. "Honored Chieftain, I will follow you into battle if you order it. But I beg you to consider whether this war serves the Brucali people or merely serves our pride." Gorth stared at the hologram for a long time. His expression was unreadable. Then he stood and left the observation chamber without a word. Dae-young watched him go, uncertain whether this was good or bad. But the sessions continued. More voices joined. More stories were shared. The picture that emerged was clear. The vast majority of ordinary citizens from all three species wanted peace. They wanted negotiation. They wanted to continue building the cooperative relationships that already existed in the disputed territory. On the third day, the formal council session reconvened. The three hostile delegations returned to the chamber, along with all the other species. The time for citizen dialogue had ended. Now the leaders had to respond. Prime Arbitrator Velthuan called the session to order. "We have heard from hundreds of citizens over the past 3 days. Now we must decide how to proceed. War Chieftain Gorth, will the Brucali Empire speak first?" Gorth stood slowly. He looked older somehow, as if the past 3 days had aged him. "The Brucali Empire has heard the voices of our people. We have heard their concerns and their desires. We have also heard the voices of Krillian and Vexthari citizens and found that they are not so different from our own." He paused, his massive hands gripping the edge of his platform. "I have been a warrior my entire life. I believe that strength was measured in conquests and victories. But perhaps there is a different kind of strength. The strength to listen when you would rather fight. The strength to change when you would rather stay the course." The chamber held its breath. "The Brucali Empire withdraws its claim to the disputed sector," Gorth said. "We propose instead that the territory be managed jointly by all three species, with representation from the citizens who already live and work there." The Krillian Hive speaker stood next. "The collective has also heard the voices of our people. We have discovered divisions within our hive mind that we did not know existed. This concerns us, but it also teaches us something important. Unity does not mean everyone thinking exactly the same thoughts. True unity allows for different perspectives while maintaining common purpose." The hive speaker's wings shimmered. "The Krillian collective supports the Brucali proposal for joint management of the disputed sector. We will work with our neighbors to create a framework that benefits all species." Finally, the Vexthari High Commander stood. He looked at Trade Officer Yuna, who was still in the chamber despite being officially relieved of duty. Then he looked at Dae-young. The Vexthari Union has learned a difficult lesson, the commander said quietly. We have been so focused on what we believed our people needed that we stopped listening to what they actually wanted. This was our failure as leaders. He straightened, his crystalline form catching the light. The Vexthari Union accepts the joint management proposal. We also propose the creation of a permanent citizen council to advise all three governments on matters affecting the disputed sector. Let this be a reminder that leaders serve their people, not the other way around. The peace agreement took 2 more days to finalize. Representatives from all 3 species worked together, drafting frameworks for joint management and citizen representation. Daeyoung's team assisted where needed, but mostly they observed. This was no longer about human intervention. It was about the 3 species learning to work together, but not everyone was happy with the outcome. On the 5th day after Daeyoung's speech, the Galactic Council held another session. This time, the topic was humanity itself. The human delegation has achieved something remarkable, Velthuan said, opening the session. However, several council members have raised concerns about the methods used. We must address these concerns formally. A delegate from the Morvian species stood first. The Morvians were an ancient race known for strict adherence to protocol. The humans undermined established authority by speaking directly to ordinary citizens without government approval. They encouraged junior officers to speak out against their superiors. These actions, while effective, set a dangerous precedent. Another delegate agreed. What happens when every species begins questioning their leaders based on emotional appeals? Order and hierarchy exist for reasons. The humans may have prevented one war, but they've opened the door to chaos. More voices joined the criticism. Some elder species argued that humanity's approach was too radical, too disruptive to established systems. Others worried that encouraging citizen participation would weaken the authority of the council itself. Daeyoung listened to it all without reaction. He had expected this. Success always came with consequences. Scholar Prince Nalvix drifted to the speaker's position. I must admit, I underestimated the humans. Their methods were unorthodox but effective. However, I share the concerns about precedent. Young species often bring fresh perspectives, but they also lack the wisdom to see long-term consequences. The debate continued for hours. Some species defended humanity's actions, pointing to the successful resolution of what could have been a devastating war. Others argued that the ends didn't justify the means, that proper channels and protocols existed for good reasons. Finally, Prime Arbitrator Velthuan called for a motion. The Council must decide, should the human delegation be formally censured for their actions? Should Earth's voting privileges be suspended? Should restrictions be placed on future human diplomatic activities? The question hung in the air like a blade. Daeyoung felt Hannah tense beside him, but he remained calm. He had done what he believed was right. If the Council chose to punish Earth for that, so be it. Before we vote, Velthuan continued, does the human delegation wish to make a statement in their defense? Daeyoung stood slowly. He walked to the center platform one final time, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. This might be the last time he addressed the Council as an equal. He needed to make it count. Honored Council, he began. I will not defend our actions by claiming we followed proper protocols. Because we didn't. I will not argue that our methods were traditional. Because they weren't. I will only offer the truth, and let you judge whether that truth has value. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many gazes as possible. When my species first reached the stars, we were arrogant. We thought our technology made us special. We thought our achievements gave us the right to stand among you as equals. But we've learned something in our 15 years as council members. His voice grew softer but somehow more powerful. We learned that we're not special. We're just another species trying to survive in a vast and often hostile universe. We make mistakes. We fail more often than we succeed. We carry scars from our own stupidity and violence. Daeyoung paused, gathering his thoughts. But those scars taught us something that I think some of you may have forgotten. They taught us what it feels like to be afraid. Really afraid. Not afraid of losing status or territory, but afraid of ceasing to exist. Afraid that one more mistake might be the last one. He walked slowly around the platform. Every species in this chamber has forgotten wars. You've had so many conflicts over so many thousands of years that they blur together into history. But for humanity, war is recent. The fear is fresh. We remember what it's like to stand on the edge of extinction and have to choose whether to step back or fall forward. Perhaps, De Jong agreed. But it also makes us desperate enough to try things that older, wiser species have given up on. It makes us believe that impossible solutions might still be possible. It makes us willing to look foolish if there's even a small chance of preventing unnecessary death. He stopped walking and stood still in the center of the platform. You call what we did radical and disruptive? You're right. But isn't that why you formed this council in the first place? Not to maintain old systems and hierarchies, but to find new ways of coexisting? To prevent the kinds of conflicts that could destroy everything you've built? War Chieftain Gorth stood up. The massive Brucali looked at De Jong with something that might have been respect. The human ambassador raises a fair point. The council was founded after the Great Dying, when 17 species nearly destroyed themselves in a sector-wide war. We created this body to prevent such tragedies. Have we forgotten that purpose in favor of comfortable traditions? Scholar Prince Nauvik's S-energy form pulsed thoughtfully. The chieftain speaks wisdom. Perhaps we have become too attached to our protocols, too comfortable with our established ways. The humans reminded us that sometimes the newest voice speaks the oldest truths. Velthoanus' wings spread wide. The arbitrator recognizes the Etherian Scholar Prince's point. However, we must still address the concerns about precedent and authority. Then address them openly, De Jong said. Debate them honestly. But don't punish humanity for reminding you of what you've forgotten. Punish us, if you must, for breaking protocols or undermining authority. But know that what you're really punishing is the idea that ordinary citizens deserve to be heard. That their lives and fears and hopes matter as much as political positions and ancient claims. He looked at each of the 3 formerly hostile delegations. 3 days ago, these species were ready to go to war. Now they're working together to build something new. That didn't happen because of clever diplomacy or superior technology. It happened because we listen to people who are usually ignored. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. But I would do it again without hesitation. De Jong walked back toward his seat, but before he sat down, he turned back one last time. You laughed at us 4 days ago. You called us children playing at diplomacy. Maybe we are children. But children remember things that adults forget. We remember how to hope. We remember how to trust. We remember that the most courageous thing you can do is admit you're afraid and ask for help anyway. His voice grew quiet, but somehow it carried to every corner of the chamber. We're not here to teach you anything. We're here to remind you of what you once knew. What you knew when your own species was young and fragile. When you first reached for the stars not as conquerors, but as dreamers. When you believed that maybe, somehow, things could be better. He sat down. The chamber was completely silent, then something unexpected happened. War Chieftain Gorth stood and made a gesture that Brucali used to show respect to honored opponents. I vote against censure. The humans acted correctly, even if they did so incorrectly. They achieved what we could not. That deserves recognition, not punishment. The Krillian hive speaker's wings shimmered. The collective agrees. We find value in what the humans have shown us. They should be encouraged, not restricted. The Vextari High Commander stood as well. The Union supports the humans. They saved us from our own pride. That is worth more than adherence to protocol. One by one, other species added their voices. Not all agreed, but slowly a consensus formed. Humanity would not be censured. Instead, something else was proposed. Velthuana's clicking intensified with what De Jong had learned to recognize as excitement. The Council proposes a new designation. The human delegation has demonstrated unique capabilities in mediation and conflict resolution. Therefore, Earth is hereby recognized as a mediator species, the first species to receive this designation in 800 years. The chamber erupted in conversation. Hannah grabbed Dae-Young's arm. Did they just promote us? I think they did, Taemin said, his voice filled with disbelief. Velphilon continued. As a mediator species, Earth will have additional responsibilities and privileges. Human diplomats may be called upon to assist in resolving disputes across the galaxy. In return, humanity receives full voting status on all council matters and increased resource allocations for diplomatic training. The arbitrator's wings spread to their full span. The council recognizes that wisdom is not merely about how long you have lived, but about what you have survived and learned from that survival. Humanity has survived its own darkness and emerged with insights that older species have forgotten. This is valuable. This is worthy of honor. Later, after the session ended and the formalities were completed, Velphilon approached Dae-Young privately. The ancient Krillion's clicking was softer now, almost gentle. I owe you an apology, Ambassador. When you first requested to mediate, I thought it was foolish arrogance. I see now that it was something different. It was hope. Desperate, perhaps, but genuine.